So today we're going to be checking out and installing the all-new Chimera titanium BMX cranks. Now Chimera also makes a fully titanium electric BMX bike, but they've really dabbled into the aftermarket parts for BMX bikes, which I'm really stoked on. If you're interested in any of their stuff, click the link in the description below to be able to check out a vast variety of different parts you can get for your BMX bike, or maybe even their electric BMX bike if that's something you're into. With that being said, let's get right into this unboxing and install. All right, so getting right into it, you are presented with a very well packaged setup right here. So I have the sprocket and the cranks, as well as a couple little accessories. This is the sprocket. This thing is beautiful. It is a 28 tooth spline drive sprocket, which I'm excited to put this bad boy on. It's gonna go perfect with my bike. Open up the bubble wrap, well packaged crank arms here. These are 170 millimeter crank arms. Super pumped on these things. Oh my God, they're so light together. It's unreal. We'll get to that in a moment. You have the spindle with all the hardware in the ends there. I love this. This is really cool. It's almost like a Chinese finger trap. You have a bottom bracket spacers. I won't really be needing this because I already have them in my frame. I don't like pulling those things out because my frame is already pre-stretched for what I have in there right now. And I have some extra bearings just in case I end up blowing them out. This is a great plus. Now, like I said, this is a 28 tooth sprocket. Really nice. It resembles a lot of what I'm riding right now. It's at a profile crank, so I'm really excited to see the weight difference, or at least feel the weight difference when I swap these out and head to the skate park. The spindle, my gosh, dude, titanium is a game changer. I've been running a lot of titanium parts on my bike for over a decade. This is so light. I wish I had a scale on me to really give you good representation. I will put all the numbers of how much each of these pieces weigh on the screen as I go through them. The hardware on this is top notch. Really nice, love it. I do know that he is selling them in different colors now, not just the crank arms, but also the bolts as well. Now to the meat and potatoes. God, these things look so good. So good. Beefy enough that you know you won't break them. Not too thin. I love the lattice design. It's a nice deep groove in there. Definitely nice. I'm into this. I will show you how you can tell between the right and the left here momentarily when we do the install. Dang, look at that. These things are so beautiful. Well engineered, and there's so much testing that's gone involved with these cranks. They don't just make them, put them in CAD, and then just send them out for people to ride. He puts a lot of rigorous testing into these things, which I will link the YouTube videos below or his Instagram account for you to be able to check out and see all the test videos. Now, like I was saying earlier, these are spline drive cranks, and with spline drive cranks, it's really hard to distinguish which one is left and which one is right. And they don't have a printed display on the side because these things are really sleek looking. You don't want to clutter up the design with an R and an L. With that being said, they made it really easy and simplistic for us to understand. Have the pedal bosses facing towards yourself, and if the lattice doesn't face a V out like this, then it's the wrong direction. We switch them around. It makes a V facing out, which means this is the left and this is the right. Love that design. Now, when it comes to the install, there's a couple things you're gonna need. Right out of the gate, you're gonna need a crescent wrench, a crank puller, grease, I'm using a toothbrush, and Allen keys. Now, I'm also going to be using my socket wrench to be able to get my wheel off and my Allen keys in order to take my existing cranks off the bike, but this is a must. This will make it a lot easier to be able to get the cranks on your bike. Now, when you purchase the cranks, you will probably be getting one of these with your cranks as well, but this is a profile pull tool, and I'm going to be using this to be able to put the cranks on with ease. Now, you want to make sure your bottom bracket is already free of all the dirt and grime from your previous set of cranks, and make sure that the bearings spin smoothly, which they already do, and I don't want to waste those brand new bearings unless I need them. After that, I'll take some grease and I'll put it on the spindle and use the toothbrush to wipe it in there so I'm not missing any spots throughout all the splines. Grease is your friend with crank installation for sure. Next, I do the same thing with the crank arm. I'll put a little bit of grease in the crank arm, use the toothbrush and go around the inside of the crank arm. You can use your finger as well if you really kind of want to do that. I like to make sure that I'm giving even amount of grease throughout the entire crank arm. Next, I'm going to take the crank arm, which is my right-hand side, my non-drive side, and fitting the spindle onto it. Next, I'm using the crank tool that we talked about before that Profile Racing offers, that Chimera will eventually be offering in their cranks, I'm pretty sure of, with an extra spacer here to be able to allow there to be able to fill up that gap from this crank tool. So with that being said, I've got that all lined up. I use my wrench and I fit the cranks on pretty snug to get in position right, and we'll get straight over to the drive side sprocket. After that, I take my bottom bracket cone washer, push that up flush. I'm gonna get that excess grease there. I'm gonna pop this crank arm on this side. Check the distance that I want here. Looking good. Now with this side, I'm gonna put a little bit more grease here, and I'm gonna slowly feed the sprocket on. It won't be nearly as tight as the cranks, I'll show you. So I put a little bit more grease there. A little bit of grease on this washer that I like to use. Feed that in there. Like I said, grease is your friend. Put a little bit here on the sprocket splines as well. I'm gonna line that up with this line here. Get it started. And I'm gonna get to where there's just enough of an edge there. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna use a rubber mallet and an extra washer that I have that goes in the bottom bracket to be able to smack this on evenly. Actually, I won't even need to, because it was that easy to go on once you put some grease on there. So that is all the way sitting flush. I have the right amount of space here on the spindle to add the other crank arm. Pop some grease in there. Lather it up. And now we line it up. We're gonna put this one vertical to make it easier for me to line up. And that looks pretty straight. And we are going to use that crank tool to push this on the rest of the way. Now, as I've gotten it really close, what I'm going to do now is eyeball both sides of those. I'm going to pop the hardware in the side and tighten them up evenly to make sure I have an even snug on both sides. The hardware is a 10 millimeter versus an 8 millimeter. Now that we're all lined up and I have the proper distance between my chainstay and the crank arm, that way if the bike was to drop really hard, this hitting really hard isn't going to hit the frame and damage it, or vice versa. I don't really get much flex here on the chromoly frames, but looking good so far. Let's get this thing all back together and I'll give you guys, I guess, my initial thoughts on these cranks before we take them to the skate park. Now the install and fitment of these cranks were perfect. Literally the easiest install I've done on my bike in a very long time. Going from a tubular crank to a squared off crank arm is going to feel a bit different for me, so I wanted to see which pedals I would prefer. BSD, Snafu, or these Alienation. Now through the process, I was threading on the pedals and noticed that all the pedals felt pretty much the same except for one of them. And I actually thought it was the crank arm threads, but it wasn't. It was actually my spindle thread on the Alienation pedal, but we didn't find that out until later. But I did reach out to Austin and he immediately tested out so many different pedals on the crank arms to make sure it wasn't a problem on his end. So definitely rest assured that the cranks are actually in perfect shape. It was just a pedal spindle on my end. So with that being said, if you're interested in any other Chimera product, such as these cranks or the electric BMX bike, put a comment below. I plan on taking this thing to the skate park tomorrow when the weather's a bit nicer. So with that being said, if you guys like this video, drop a like. If you love it, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one.